Welcome to the Oral Wealth Prosperity and Practice Podcast. I'm Brian Swilling, partner in Navapath, and with me today is Dr. Jackson Sadler, a practicing oral and maxillofacial surgeon. I need to learn how to say that.
No, it's okay. It takes practice.
So we're excited to expand our conversation from the last episode on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And we're going to focus on the rules that have changed around student loans, financial aid, and 529s. So I'm excited to have Jackson here. He's dug into the student loan section, mainly because a lot of people, we talked about it yesterday, a lot of people have talked to you about it already and have no clue that anything's changed. Everybody's talking about student loans. So we'll start with talking about student loans, talk about the importance and where you can actionable items there. And then I'll talk a little bit about 529s for those that it might impact, or in future, if you have kids, right?
Yeah,
you can start taking advantage of it.
One of the main changes that came with the Big Beautiful Bill, and just so everybody knows, I'm not an expert on these things. I'm learning about them as I go, following all of the updates that come out from the Federal Student Aid Office, and then also from Congress as they make these updates associated with the Big Beautiful Bill. They're still coming out with some guidelines. But what we do know for now is that as far as FAFSA is concerned, the way that they are doing some of their calculations has changed. So they used to use something called expected family contribution. And basically that took into account how many students or how many kids in the household were in college at the same time. And that would affect the amount of money that the family was expected to give overall, taking into account that they have multiple kids in school. Now that has changed to something called the Student Aid Index. It's a number that schools are going to use to assess need-based aid. Basically, what you need to know is that a lower student aid index equals more need, and it can go down to negative 1,500 for the lowest income students. The previous expected family contribution was 0. Now, the way that can affect people, just give you an example. Before, if you had the expected family contribution, parents' ability to pay. So if it was assessed that the parents could pay $30,000, assuming that there are multiple kids in school at the same time, they would divide that $30,000 amongst those children. But now, each individual student is assessed individually, so they don't take the family into account. So if you have a larger family, that can end up affecting you adversely because it basically gets calculated that you don't have as much need as previously assessed. So if you have multiple siblings who are around your same age, who will also either be in college, graduate school, or professional school, it's going to be important for you to be aware of, because the amount of aid that you get may be decreased. Now, something else that's important about that is universities might still use the Student Aid Index to assess for their own institutional contributions. So if they have their own scholarships or grants or anything like that, that just kind of helps with paying for tuition or cost of living things, then they can still use the EFC for that. But SAI is going to apply to all federal loans moving forward. Another thing that that's important as far as that's concerned is if you have divorced or separated parents. So previously, what you would do is you would, the parent that you would put down is the parent that you live with, who you spend the most time with. But now they've changed that to the parent who makes the most money. So, for example, if you live with your mom and your mom makes $70,000 a year, you would previously put her down as the person who is supporting you or able to contribute to your education. But if you're now the way that they have it set up, if your father makes $150,000 a year, even if you live with your mother, you have to mark your father down as the primary contributor to your student aid. So that can also affect how much money you can get in federal aid.
Other note there is like the FAFSA release date was delayed, right?
Yeah.
So that's creating application backlogs. So it's good to be, if you're listening to this because you're thinking about, going to college or going into dental school, start early.
Law school,
yeah. All these apply. And it's also another strategy is, these things are complicated. So take advantage of the student, the financial aid offices in the school. They're a great resource to verify that you calculated your financial aid, your FAFSA correctly. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of good things about this. There's a lot of bad things. I think overall it's created a little bit of clarity in the system. So I think it's been confusing for a long time. Hopefully this does simplify it a little bit. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. But main takeaway from this, if you have siblings in college or professional school, again, including if they're getting their master's, they're getting a PhD, they're becoming a veterinarian, a lawyer, dentist, whatever that may be, or if your parents are divorced, you should check with the student aid estimator before you commit, just so you know what your aid might look like. One of the other changes that has come with this bill is to the SAVE plan. So under SAVE, it was an income-driven repayment program. Your discretionary income was basically calculated as your adjusted gross income minus 225% of the federal poverty line. So there is what they're calling a bigger shield. So potentially you could have lower payments. For grad-only loans, you pay 10% of that discretionary income, which again is your adjusted gross income minus 225% of the poverty line. Undergrad-only loans pay 5%, and mixed loans are weighted. So if your required payment doesn't cover all the monthly interest, the government actually is going to cover the unpaid interest, so your balance isn't going to continue to grow as long as you're paying something.
Yeah, this replaces the repay, right? In the previous income-based payment plans.
So for an example of that, if you were a graduate borrower, or you were a single person, and your adjusted gross income was $75,000 with the 225% shield, SAVE payment is commonly in the low $300 per month, and it can be even lower than that. And again, it's going to just making sure that you're making the payments is going to make sure that you don't continue to accrue interest on your student loans.
Yeah, and that unpaid interest benefit is huge.
Sure.
Because a lot of people on the current plans, their income-based payment is way less than the interest accrual. So the loan balance just keeps going up and up and up, almost to a place where it creates a psychological, like the government told me to pay this amount on the plan, and it's doubled.
Yeah, it's not
over the last 10 years.
Right. One other thing about that, there is some litigation going through the court right now where some loans have been placed into a special SAVE administrative forbearance. So they started accruing interest again on August 1st of this year. So it's affected whether or not that interest is waived while you're in forbearance. So very important to make sure that you're keeping track of that, because if your loans went back into payment and you're back in interest, you're just accruing more interest on your loans than you may be aware of.
Yeah. In this section, there was also less important, but there was also expansion on the Pell Grant, kind of opened it up to non-traditional colleges. Mm-hmm. So like if you have, let's say you're an older listener and you have kids and their college is not their path, you can now get Pell Grants for like workforce training. So so more, more blue collar training, more going to train for plumbing or electricity. It used to not be
vocational.
Vocational work.
Or is that the word vocational?
Yeah.
Trade.
Yeah.
Trade. Yes.
I don't think blue collar is the appropriate term either, but
I'm blue collar. I mean, I get up and I go to work every day.
That's true.
Yeah.
We all are.
I work with my hands every day.
Yep.
All right. So next point I had here is that the public service loan forgiveness, the resources I've been able to find basically indicate that this may be a little bit more workable than it previously had been. There are a lot of rules and guidelines around what qualify as FQHC or federally qualified health center, I believe it stands for, where you can go and you can work oftentimes for a lower salary, but you're working in the community, you're serving a public good and a need. So they give you back, or they forgive some portion of your loan. So the rules on that are still kind of changing and coming out, but it's something to pay attention to, especially if you are in dental school or specifically medical school. Dental school, if you're doing specific types of residencies like oral surgery, you may be working in a hospital that qualifies. But specifically for medical school, if you're working for the government or if you're working for one of these facilities that qualifies, then may take care of a good chunk of your loans for you.
Yeah, a lot of rural nonprofit hospital systems, rural hospitals, a lot of them qualify. And they also added like a proactive credit. So if you've been making payments, but you weren't registering them under the public loan service forgiveness, you can now get those credits, even though you didn't apply for it in the past.
See, and I'm glad that I've been reading this because actually, when I was going through residency, I worked for 6 years in a county safety net hospital, and when I went to apply for public service loan forgiveness, it didn't qualify, even though they got millions of dollars in government aid each year. Even though a significant portion of the patients that were treated there did not have any type of insurance. It was literally where people went when they had nowhere else to go. And it always kind of baffled me that didn't qualify. I'd spent a significant amount of time there doing that work, and it was good work. It was meaningful work. I'm glad I did it, whether they give me my loan forgiveness or not. But it's just the rules were strange, so it didn't really make sense to me why that wouldn't qualify, but other ones would. So, like Brian was saying, hopefully this brings a little bit of clarity and we can get some of that time back.
Yeah, and if you ever, go back into nonprofit work and complete the years that those should qualify according, we'll have to see how all this plays out. But
yeah, absolutely.
But no, that's good. It's helpful.
And then the last thing that I really wanted to cover directly, then I'm going to let Brian take back over with the 529s. I think probably the biggest change, or I think the most impactful change for most people who are either about to start professional school, maybe early on in professional school, if you have a long program that's like 4+ years, or if you are in college and you're thinking that you may want to get a graduate degree of any kind, they're getting rid of the Graduate Plus loans. And the reason that is important is previously with the Graduate Plus loans, you could borrow the full amount of your education. So, if my dental school training, we're just going to use simple numbers. If my dental school training costs $200,000 over the course of 4 years, and then I have to borrow a little bit more money just so that I can live, because there's not a whole lot of time to work during dental school. So, just paying for housing, food, transportation, very basic things, you could get full coverage and they would allow you to pay that back. Now, what has happened is they're capping the total amount that you can get. So across the lifetime of your loans, the maximum amount that you can get is $257,500. Now, that's important because if you've heard any of our other podcasts, you may have heard that the average loan amount for students coming out of dental school is about $312,000. So for some people, that's going to leave a pretty significant gap that may be difficult for you to close. And also importantly associated with that is it's cumulative. So if you went to undergrad and you had student loans associated with it, then those count towards the $257,000 total. If you go to graduate school for your master's or PhD, the annual cap that you can receive is $20,500, and the overall total for graduate loans is $100,000. For professional students, again, doctors, dentists, lawyers, pharmacists, veterinarians, the annual cap is $50,000, and the lifetime amount that you can borrow is $200,000. So if you are planning to go to graduate school for your PhD, and your PhD program is going to cost $30,000 a year, and it's going to take you 4 or 5 years to get through it, that the amount that you can borrow from the federal government is not going to cover your tuition. It's not going to cover your living expenses either. So where that leaves a lot of people is either looking towards their institution specifically for additional aid. So again, that can come in the form of grants, scholarships, tuition waivers, assistantships and fellowships, work study programs, and loan repayment assistant programs. And probably I think the potentially most impactful part of this is when people still have gaps in their ability to pay for their tuition. Pretty much the only place that they're left to turn is to private institutions for loans.
Yeah, it seems like an opportunity where lenders are going to jump on,
right?
Because if you're in a professional school, these caps aren't going to be nowhere close to covering the annual tuition,
right? So that is something to be aware of for several reasons. If you're going to look at a private loan, they're going to use your credit and your income and often a cosigner to determine if you qualify for it. So we've also talked previously about how important it is to develop your credit early on. And this is a perfect example of that. If you happen to be in high school and you're hearing this, if you can get a credit card and you can get a low limit on it, and you can make sure that you only spend it when you really need it, and you can pay it off pretty much immediately, that is a great way to start building your credit. And then once you get to the point where you're applying for these private loans, if you need them, you're just more attractive to these loaners because they believe that you're more likely to pay them off. Now, the other thing is private loans can be fixed or variable rate. Variable rate can be a problem because if you lock in, and oftentimes when they present these to you, the variable rate is going to appear lower than the fixed rate. But the issue with that is that the variable rate can skyrocket. So if, for example, you have a potential variable rate of 4% and you have a fixed rate of 5.5%. In the short term, it may make more sense based on the math to take the 4%, but we don't know what the economy is going to do. We don't know how your financier is going to reassess and reevaluate these loans and determine how much more you should be paying. So if interest rates go up, if your interest rate goes from 4 to now it's 8, your payments just doubled. And there is less relief with this type of loan also than there are with the federal loans. So less safety nets like the public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayments like the SAVE program. So just very important to be aware of because it can affect your personal life and your personal income, quality of life more than federal student loans have previously.
Yeah, because and this is why we talk about being very careful about refinancing student loans and federal student loans to private, because there's options on the federal side. There's not options for private loans. You're paying that back as as scheduled, regardless of what happens to you, or, you default, right?
Right.
So it's definitely going to be a sticky area to make sure you focus on. I think that's most of the section, right? You have one more point?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention. So if you find yourself in a situation where you do need private loans to cover the rest of that gap, recommendations that I've found have been to compare at least 3 different lenders on their APR. So fixed versus variable, and something called the origination and late fees, your in-school payment options. So whether you can defer, do interest only or flat payment, cosigner release rules, and then their forbearance policy. And then make sure that you got all of these things documented before you sign anything. Make sure you understand how these things are going to affect you before you sign anything, honestly, because the companies, like, just if we're being honest with you, whether or not you understand is not their responsibility. If you sign the thing, then you basically told them that you understood what you were doing. You agreed to this, to this contract that they're putting in front of you, and now it's legally binding. So that can affect your quality of life across your career.
Again, like for all these things, learn a little bit about it, but leverage the resources you have. Leverage the student aid office. Leverage, studentaid.gov, right? Like there's a million different resources that are available that a lot of people just don't take advantage of. They just kind of, with student loans, they gave it to me. It's good. That's good enough. Mm-hmm. So make sure you leverage the experts, but be educated personally enough to at least ask the right questions to these individuals.
Yep. Anybody can make a mistake, and anybody can have a less than thorough understanding of these things. So the best protection that you have against that is to understand it yourself, at least to some degree, at least to the point where you can say, that sounds like it's in line with the things that I've read and that I've learned, or that seems a little off. Can you explain that to me more so I can make sure that we're on the same page?
Yep. And that's a lot of changes for the student loans and prepayment and payment options. The other change that we want to talk about today is on 529 plans. So depending on the audience, this may be more relevant or less relevant, but it's definitely relevant for any parents or grandparents that have kids K through 12 or in college. But the expansion really is around the K through 12 expansion. So it's expanded the ability to use your 529 funds for it used to say K through 12, but now it's expanded through K through 12 tutoring, testing fees, and dual enrollment. So like maybe have a hybrid, go to school a couple days, study at home the other days. And they increase that cap that you're allowed to use each year from 10,000 to 20,000. And this starts in 2026. So big changes for the ability to put kids or grandkids, in a good spot. Or if you're a healthcare professional, dentist, and you're thinking about having kids or have young kids, there's additional benefits to these 529 plans that you need to be aware of. In general, like other things you can cover, you can think about it like, so parents can use these 529 funds to pay, again, private K through 12 tutoring for a struggling student, cover AP fees. It used to just be the schooling part, but now it's expanded to all education related services. So it can really help students get off on the right track. So that's something to be aware of, take advantage of that.
Talk to your financial advisor.
Talk to your financial advisor. So as we recap today, the two major changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is the expansion of the 529s and the new resources for student loans and FAFSA. The overarching theme here is, these are more tools to build your ideal life. So as we always have in this, in this episode, all these things are designed to educate, to build that ideal life. So I highly recommend, as Jackson said a second ago, to review with your financial advisor, integrate these into your personalized financial plan I call the Balanced Wealth Blueprint. Every time there's a change, it's time to kind of refresh that plan. Make sure you're still on the right path. Also, as I mentioned in the last episode, I have recently written a blog post that is on my website, www.navapathfinancial.com, where you can get more details here. As always, you can reach out, comment, and we'll get back to you. So thank you for having us, Jackson. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you on future episodes. I always say listening to us on future episodes.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you sometime soon.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.